disabled is not the one necessarily who cannot see physically. It's the one who is spiritually disabled. The one who has eyes but cannot see the truth. The one who has ears but cannot use them to listen to the truth. The one who has energy and health but depletes and exhausts their energy and health in disobeying Allah rather than obeying Allah and going towards Allah. The one who uses their energy to run away, walk away, and distract others rather than run to and encourage others to go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the Islam taught us, redefined what worth is, what value is. And this is throughout, even in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the surah that we all know, عَبَسَ وَتَوَلَّى أَنْ جَاءَهُ الْأَعْمَى وَمَا يُدْرِيكَ لَعَلَّهُ يَزَّكَّى أَوْ يَذَّكَّرْ فَتَنْفَعُهُ الذِّكْرَى. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he was approached by Abdullah ibn Maktum, and Abdullah ibn Maktum could not see. He was an old man. And he was somebody who was committed to knowledge. Came to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ to learn, to seek knowledge. He would be the first. As soon as he heard there's a new ayah of the Quran revealed, he would run to the Prophet ﷺ and say, Ya Rasulullah, I heard there's a new ayah. I want to be the first to learn it and memorize it. He was excited to go. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, at that time, he was busy with the elite of Quraysh, who finally made time to come listen. But his mind is thinking, if I spend time with these powerful elite, these leaders, I can affect change on a wider level. Right? Top-down change that can come from the elite. It's incredible. You don't get this opportunity. So he gave attention to these elite, to these powerful people in Quraysh, and he simply turned away from the blind man. And he frowned because the blind man came interrupting. The Quran came to remind him that even though this individual could not see your frown, Allah saw your frown. And even though you were intending to do what is good for the deen, you subscribed to the pre-existing value system of who's valuable, who deserves attention, and who does not. And in the sight of Allah, that's not how the equation works. Your money means nothing to Allah. Your lineage means nothing to Allah. Your business means nothing to Allah. Your reputations, your degrees mean nothing to Allah, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَنْظُرُ إِلَى صُوَرِكُمْ وَلَا إِلَى أَجْسَادِكُمْ وَلَكِنْ يَنْظُرُ إِلَى مَا فِي قُلُوبِكُمْ وَإِنْ another narration, أَعْمَالِكُمْ. Allah does not look at your outward appearances and the portraits, suwar, like what you display about yourself. What do you usually show? Your degrees, your car, the things that you use to increase your net worth with people. Allah does not care about that. Allah cares about what's within you. This state here of your heart. How alive is it? How real is it? How genuine is it? How true it is in its connection with Allah. And then looks at the reflection of that through your action. Those are the things that matter to Allah. What you do with your wealth, what you do with your energy, what you do with Allah has given you, and how you're able to maintain that genuine relationship with Him that nobody can see except Him. Which is why nobody will ever truly know your worth, net worth with Allah, except Allah. Which is why as Muslims we never belittle anybody. We never belittle anybody. Because in the sight of Allah, they may be much greater, much greater than any of us, than the rest of us combined. The companions once saw Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. And Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, he was very thin. Very thin. His legs were described as very thin. But he was one of the greatest scholars of this ummah. So the companions were making a remark at how thin he is. Just a passing remark. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ did not tolerate that. And it is shame on you. If these legs were to be weighed in the sight of Allah, they would outweigh all of your deeds and actions. Can you imagine? Just that passing remark about somebody in that way, in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is so unacceptable. And think about the way most of us talk in this regard. You know, I've seen some of our own brothers and sisters describe certain people. Oh, this person is this. Oh, this person is that. Why did they get this guy to do it? Why did they get this guy to? Why did they get this girl? Why did they get this sister? Why, I couldn't find anybody better to represent us. Couldn't find anybody better outwardly. Right? This exists within our community, unfortunately. And when you look at our tradition, in terms of not just speaking well, viewing them well internally, the attitude, but also in terms of supporting and endorsing these causes. Let's look together, subhanAllah, at what the early khulafa have done. Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, he hired from Bayt al-Mal, from the treasury, any individual in the community that could not see, that had an inability that prevented them from coming to the masjid, he hired a companion that would walk with them and help them get to the masjid. Umar ibn al-Khattab from Bayt al-Mal dedicated a specific stipend, an amount of money to be given to anybody who was limited by a disability or inability. Can you imagine? We're talking about the time of Umar ibn al-Khattab. From Bayt al-Mal, money that would be given. Specific educational scholarships, Umar in his time gave those who wanted to study but were prevented by an inability, either not able to hear, not able to see, was given specific to them. And this was also done by Al-Walid ibn Abd al-Malik, who built a hospital specifically for those that were not able to walk, physical disabilities. And he invested lots of money into research to help find ways for those individuals to better access. If they could be rehabilitated physically, he would invest monies from the Bayt al-Mal to be able to guide and to help. And when they asked him why, he recalled the hadith. You know, when you build a hospital, in the deeds, especially if it's a waqf deed, usually the person who did it would mention the reason. I do this on behalf of my father, I do this on behalf of my mother, inshallah it's a sadaqah jariyah, and I'm motivated by this and this and that. When these khulafa did this, one of the things that they outwardly mentioned, we were motivated by the hadith of the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, هل تنصرون إلا بضعفائكم? Are you going to be granted victory except through good treatment of the weakest, the most vulnerable among you, the most ignored amongst you? So this is not something that we deprioritize. This is not something along the list of things that we need to invest in. Oh yeah, it'll come at the very end. Because it's a part of the attitude of the Muslim. It reflects where our priorities are and what we value and what we devalue. And to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is huge. This is huge. Don't underestimate it. And then others, Al-Khalif Al-Abbasi, Abu Ja'far Al-Mansur, he also established a hospital specifically for the blind, those who could not see. And when he was doing this, subhanAllah, he mentioned in the conversations before this construction, he mentioned highlighting the Abdullah ibn Abbas. We all know Abdullah ibn Abbas, right? Abdullah ibn Abbas, who was the greatest scholar when it comes to the Quran. You cannot study tafsir and get an ijazah in tafsir without your chain of narration going back to Abdullah ibn Abbas. Just like you cannot study Quran without your chain of narration going back to Ibn Mas'ud, recitation-wise. There's no way of escaping these as authorities. These are the first authorities on the Quran, recitation and understanding. Abdullah ibn Abbas, in his old age, when he was in his 50s, he could not see. He lost his eyesight. And yet he still was visited by hundreds, thousands of students who would read to him, including some of the khulafa who were more senior to him in age, to learn from him. And they used to call him the one who was blessed with the most incredible insight amongst us. Some of the greatest muftis, the greatest mufti of Mecca, historically, Ata ibn Rabah, he had multiple disabilities. He had a physical disability. He had like he could not see. His hearing, at the end of his life became very heavy, difficult to hear. Yet he was one of the greatest, still considered to be the greatest mufti that the Hijaz has seen. And when these khulafa would come with their great dress, with their great entourage, with their gold and their whatever they had, they would humble themselves. They would get out of the caravan and walk and sit in his presence to honor him. This is what Islam taught us. This is what Islam taught us. Your worth with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is dependent on this here, which none of us can see. So we'll never know for sure where we stand with Allah. And it depends on what we can see, the action, a manifestation of it, what's within. But may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us better, Ya Rab, to the weakest amongst us, Ya Rab, Ameen. May Allah make us from those who serve them and honor them and dignify them, and not from those who abuse them or disenfranchise them or distance them, Ya Rab, Ameen, Ameen, Ameen. As you know, we are doing a movement within ISNA, inshallah, to make our programming accessible for the deaf Muslim brothers and sisters. Imagine for a long time there has not been a translation of the Quran, a reliable translation of the Quran for the deaf Muslim brothers and sisters. Can you imagine all of these years? So you're reading the Quran, you can pick up the Quran and read it, but they have not been able to access that. There's very little information available for our deaf Muslim brothers and sisters, comprehensive information. And out of the many projects that we're trying to do at once, this is, in my opinion, one of the most important and one of the greatest sadaqah jariyas that we can do. And you'd be surprised, imagine seeing a Muslim, meeting a Muslim who's been a Muslim for years, but they have not been able to understand some of the most basic, in our eyes, in your eyes, some of the most basic, knowledgeable Islam, because they have not been able to access it. And we know even written material that is written, it's still not as accessible, not as in depth as when you're able to engage and have a conversation. So I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to be from those who support these initiatives, and I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to be from those who honor them with our words, honor them with our assumptions that we make about them, honor them with the priorities, the choices, and honor them with the way that we speak about them, the way that we greet them, the way we talk about them, and honor them when it is time to give and when it's time to provide. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless all of us. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه الغفور الرحيم. الحمد لله وكفى والصلاة والسلام على من اصطفى. اللهم اهدنا فيمن هديت وعافنا فيمن عافيت وتولنا فيمن توليت وبارك اللهم لنا فيما أعطيت وقنا واصرف عنا برحمتك شر ما قضيت. اللهم اهدنا واهدي بنا واجعلنا مهتدين. اللهم بارك لنا وفينا وعلينا واجعلنا مباركين. اللهم اقبلنا وتقبل منا واجعلنا مقبولين. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على نبينا وحبيبنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. وأقم الصلاة إن الصلاة كانت على المؤمنين كتابا موقوتا. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. يا أيها الذين آمنوا أطيعوا الله ورسوله ولا تولوا عنه وأنتم تسمعون ولا تكونوا كالذين قالوا سمعنا وهم لا يسمعون إن شر الدواب عند الله الصم البكم الذين لا يعقلون ولو علم الله فيهم خيرا لأسمعهم ولو أسمعهم لتولوا وهم معرضون
يا أيها الذين آمنوا استجيبوا لله وللرسول إذا دعاكم لما يحييكم واعلموا أن الله يحول بين المرء وقلبه وأنه إليه تحشرون واتقوا فتنة لا تصيبن الذين ظلموا منكم خاصة واعلموا أن الله شديد العقاب. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. واذكروا إذ أنتم قليل مستضعفون في الأرض تخافون أن يتخطفكم الناس فآواكم وأيدكم بنصره ورزقكم من الطيبات لعلكم تشكرون. يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تخونوا الله والرسول وتخونوا أماناتكم وأنتم تعلمون. واعلموا أنما أموالكم وأولادكم فتنة وأن الله عنده أجر عظيم. الله